Hey everybody. Well, the title of the video probably has you wondering, um, how could I have possibly gotten this airplane ready to fly in about a week or so? Well, I did not. In fact, there's the center section just sitting there looking good, and tucked up behind the lights up in the rafters is the fuselage and tail section. So, how could it possibly be just about ready to fly? Well, here we go. So, previously mentioned, I believe a week or so ago, I had said that a friend of mine picked up a Hostetler Super Chipmunk 30% scale, so the exact same size as the one I'm building. And he picked it up knowing that he didn't necessarily want it, but he knew that I would most likely want it. So we worked out a deal, and he actually drove up here last week and delivered me the airplane. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Kind of to get into the details of the airplane here, um, I've recovered a good portion of it in the last 2 days. Now, there was nothing wrong with the covering. The guy that built it, unfortunately, he passed away. So my good buddy Brian Taylor picked up the airplane from his estate, um, and he was an excellent builder. Really, really a good builder. Really good at covering. Um, However, there were things I did not like about the covering. The main thing I didn't like was the blue. This is unfortunately covered in ultra coat. I know we don't live in a perfect world. Um, but the blue that was used was deep blue, which is very close to monocoat royal blue. And it looked all right. It was a little too light of a blue for my liking. I mean, I know this airplane very, very well, and I was having a hard time accepting that. But then the more I started to look at it, because of how well it was covered, I really didn't want to change anything because of how well it was done. But then I started looking at things a little closer, and as you can see, this no longer has that light blue. This is Ultra Coat Midnight Blue, which is just a little bit brighter than Monocoat Insignia Blue. But it's a really nice color. I mean, that is just a beautiful color blue. But anyways, before I get into too much detail on what I recovered on it, let's talk about why I did it. So he had the stripes laid out absolutely perfect. And before I agreed to buy the airplane, I was asking Brian about the stripes. I said there should be 9 stripes on each side, 9 red stripes, that is, for it to be accurate. And sure enough, they're there. And the spacing was great, and everything was perfect. So the more I was looking at it, I'm going, man, I just don't like the blue. But then I really started to look at it. And you see this line right here. You notice as I pan up, it is straight all the way across. And that's the way it's supposed to be. The leading edge of the wing is at a taper, but where this line breaks right here, if you put a laser on it, it should be straight from tip to tip. And the top of the wing, it was actually going this way and this way. So the blue had a V shape to it. And I'm like, okay, I cannot accept that. So, upon even further investigation, the bottom of the wing has a very similar situation. There's a break between the blue and the red, which is a white stripe. And that white stripe is supposed to be a constant thickness from tip to tip in a straight line. And these angles on the blue and the red were all crooked. So I said, all right, we're going to recover. Now, the fuselage is really good. Even the stripes on the tail, everything was great. We'll get into that in a minute. So what I had to do is I really didn't want to take those stripes off there because they were so well done. But because the blue was at an angle, the ends of the stripes were at an angle. So if I just peeled the blue off and straightened everything out, the stripes wouldn't line up anymore. So I decided to peel the stripes off, and I actually, this is an original stripe. I just added to it. But I peeled off the blue, all the blue, and then I cut the white covering at the perimeter of the wing. So the ailerons are original, with the original white and the original red, and that actually helped out big time because that helped me line up the new stripes that I made. So after I recovered the tops of the wings with white, I went ahead and put the blue on, and then I cut new stripes and set them on there. Now, he did a really good job on those stripes, and so did I. It has been many, 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 many years since I have done Ultra Coat over top of Ultra Coat. I am a monocoat man all the way. I know all the tricks of the monocoat. So this was kind of a different thing. So as I was getting ready to lay the stripes down, I'm asking myself, how do I want to do it? Because all the fancy techniques of, using Windex, spray the surface down with Windex, lay the stripe on there, squeegee out the excess Windex, and wait overnight. With a monocoat, the Windex is ammonia based, and that will actually activate the adhesive. And once you spray the Windex down, lay the material on, squeegee it out, wait overnight, it's done. Maybe pass an iron over it a little bit. The adhesive on Ultra Coat does not work that way. It will a little bit, but it will not fully activate the adhesive for a good bond. So if you're going to put covering directly over covering and you want to use a method like that, it'll still work. What it'll allow you to do is make it so the covering is very, very perfectly on there. There's no bubbles, no nothing, no air. So you can do the Windex method, squeegee it out, and do the whole thing, then come back the next day with an iron on low heat and activate the adhesive. The other method that I usually use, which I did on the Carolina Kits chipmunk over there, is I actually cut the white covering just inside the red underneath all the way around. So that way the majority of the red was sticking to the wood itself. But honestly, I just didn't want to do it. So I figured, well, let me try to just do this the old school way, just using nothing but heat and patience. And yeah, it turned out really nice. There's a couple little bubbles here and there that will work their way out eventually. But overall, it turned out just silky smooth. And all I did was lay the stripe on there. I didn't squeegee or nothing. Once I put the stripe on there, got it into place, I used the tip of my iron on the lowest heat setting possible and just iron down the center so that way it won't go anywhere. Then in a circular motion, I started in the middle and started working my way out to the edges. Did the same thing over here, and then this way and this way. And it works out great. It takes some time, but I didn't have to perforate the material. Another method is to use the woodpecker method. But when it's covering over covering with a sheeted surface underneath, if you use a woodpecker, you might see those little dots through the covering itself. If this was an open base structure, then yes, I would have just used the woodpecker and punctured the covering. But this turned out really good. As much as I hate Ultra Coat, I can make anything look good. I'm very good at this stuff. Now the downside is it's going to look good as long as I don't take it outside ever. But that's all right. I keep my planes in the shade. Now, one of the main reasons I was excited about buying this airplane was the fact that it is covered. Now, if this was painted, I would still be sanding the paint off this thing. Then there's body work, more prep work, priming, masking, all that stuff. Nah, all done. As of yesterday morning, these wings were naked. So today I wrapped up the center section. This stripe is also original. I cut the white around this stripe and then put a new piece of white on it. Then put the new blue on top, and then added just a little piece right here to extend the red. But it blended very well, so it's barely noticeable. Did the fin as well this morning. We'll take a closer look at it in a minute, but there are parts of this airplane that the builder put something on the surface first, like a balsa or something. And where he did that, the covering was almost impossible to remove, and the fin was really bad. I was able to get the old blue off there with a heat gun, but it left a very textured finish. So unfortunately, the fin did not turn out as good as I would have liked, but it looks the same as it did. I was wondering, before I took the old blue off there, why it kind of looked textured. And I found out when I peeled it off that it did have some kind of something put over the wood first. This stuff here, I literally just cut it, grabbed it, and just pulled it off like a piece of masking tape. It came off very well. As you can see, I mean, yeah, even though I don't like Ultra Coat, that turned out really well. I bought the airplane 100% ready to fly, minus the receiver, obviously. But Brian never actually, really looked at the airplane too much. He more or less went by what he was told, and so we were both under the impression that it had a DA-120 in it, and I was not too thrilled about that. I'm not a DA guy, but we worked it all out in the deal, and it worked out quite well. So I was okay with owning a DA. But when they brought me the airplane, I started looking at it going, that doesn't look like a DA to me. So we took off the cowl, and while I was removing the cowl, I noticed that it has been repaired. Now, that's not very, that doesn't mean much because, this plane's been around, it's been heavily flown, so of course they get dinged up. But after I took off the cowl, the carburetor for this engine sits almost right in here. So when this got damaged, it actually bent one of the needles. Which typically is not a big deal, except the engine that's in this bad boy is an old BME 116 Extreme. Now, the 116 Extreme is basically a hopped up on steroids 100cc engine with a 150 size carburetor. And the carburetor that's on there doesn't exist anymore, at least that version. There's a new version of it now. So all I needed was a high-speed needle, but no go. I posted a thing on Facebook, and so many people are saying, just throw a DA100 carburetor on there. Needles from any engine will work. No. The carburetor on this engine looks like it could go on a motorcycle. The thing is huge. But Brian also understood that I was under the impression I was getting a DA-120, knowing that I really wanted a DLE-111. So he's been working with me quite a bit on trying to either get new parts for this engine. We found a carburetor. It is on back order. But we finally agreed that he actually has a DLE-111 that's not being used, and he's going to send me that engine. So that's awesome. That's called good business right there. Now the downside is, and I'll put this on pause here in a minute, and I'll show you what we're dealing with. It's going to be a little bit of a chore to get that 111 in there, believe it or not, but that's all right. And today also, another thing I was looking at, when you look at this right now, let's peek over at my Carolina kits. N111 4V, which is the same model, that is a two-seater version of the Super Chipmunk, okay? So, when I was looking at this has been redone, by the way, This pilot was sitting basically in a full cockpit type interior, and he was sitting further up here, and he was really high up in the cockpit, and it looked like a one-seater airplane. So that wasn't going to work. So I decided to get up to my old shenanigans, and yeah, he's not doing too good. Not doing too good at all. So I took the bottom of the cockpit interior out, which I actually prefer because now I can actually see inside the airplane. I moved the seat rest back further. I positioned him further in the back. I was able to keep his arms on there with the stick. So that all still looks really good. And plus, it's got a nice panel up in the front. Top of it's covered with carbon fiber. I mean, that's pretty cool. But it looks much better now. He's lower in the cockpit, further back, so it still looks like it should as a two-seater airplane. So let me put this on pause here for a minute. We'll get the radio fired up. Hang on. Okay, so when I got it, it had this setup here. It had smoke in it. I removed the smoke tank because the inside of the airplane was covered in smoke oil, and the covering on the bottom was already showing signs of damage from smoke oil. Here's my thoughts on smoke. If you have an airplane that's painted with a really rock-hard automotive paint, smoke is okay. If you're flying an airplane that's covered and made out of wood, if you're going to run smoke, run them on these cheap ARFs they have nowadays, because smoke will deteriorate your airplane. It doesn't matter how well you have it set up, how good of a builder you are. That stuff is nasty. So I yanked the smoke out of there, but it had a audio type switch already in it for a JR receiver. I removed that and installed the one for the FR Sky, which I've never used one of these before, so this was all new to me. And on the inside, I installed the TDR18 receiver. So this is a dual band receiver. So the 900 megahertz antenna up in here, and the two 2.4 antennas there. So now, when we pull this pin, we now have power. So two batteries for the receiver back here, one up here for the ignition. Everything's working good. Everything should work. So yeah, everything is looking really good. The only thing I'm not really excited about is the rudder. The linkage is all concealed inside the airplane, but I believe that's going to cause some problems, so I'm already planning on how to modify that. There, shuts it back off.
Telemetry lost.
Telemetry is lost. Yes, I know. And we already, if it'll focus, doubt it will. Come on. It's hard to see, but I do have a picture of a chipmunk on there. So, that's good. Turn that off. This has a pull-pull system for the rudder and the tail wheel. Actually, two servos going back to this arm back here that has the pull-pull system on it. But that pull-pull goes to an arm that is somehow attached to a wire that goes up into the rudder. Now, that's going to wear out eventually, and already it kind of leaves the rudder kind of wobbly. So I may have to do some modifications there, which I was already planning with the one I was building, but I can do that at any time. This has a optical kill for the ignition, so everything is just plugged. The ignition battery is plugged in and is supposed to stay plugged in because it's only going to draw power from it when you activate it from the receiver. But I'm going to put in a switch over here anyway, so I'm going to have it running through a switch as well. I just prefer it that way, so that's how I'm going to do it. Yeah, like I said, the guy that built it, this whole floor tray here is a piece of carbon fiber. Pretty nice. Shielded all of his wires. That's all pretty good. And yeah, I still have to clean up some of the wires, but it's a work in progress. All right, I'm going to go ahead and yank the cowl off so we can take a look at the front end. Hold on. Now, not using this engine is kind of a shame because he built this really nice baffle and it's got a custom scale exhaust, so none of this is going to be able to work on the new engine. And I am not a welder, so I am not about to weld. So it's just going to have pipes that are going to pop down through the cowl, which is fine. But as you can see, look at the size of this carburetor. I mean, that is a carburetor. Holy mackerel. But the BME 116 was very well known for its power because it takes in a lot of air and a lot of fuel, but that transfers into heat. So these had a lot of overheating problems. And I'm assuming that this had a forced landing because of a dead stick. So I'll feel much better with a DLE 111 in there. Now, the downside, besides the exhaust, I can get over that, is this plane requires a lot of nose weight. And the builder incorporated this piece of steel as part of the back plate for the engine. And there's also a piece on the inside. But also, it's kind of hard to see. We can probably get a better angle here. The choke and throttle servos mount to this steel plate. I mean, this guy must have been a machinist. So I'm not going to be able to use any of that, I don't think. We'll see. I'm hoping the holes will line up at least good enough to where I can still use them. So I may have to do some re-engineering on the nose, which, you know, is what it is. It's fine. I'm not worried about it. Roomy compartment up here. This had the smoke pump and everything in there. Now it's just the ignition module. Trying to think what else. I think that's about it. Yeah, and the wings. Oh yeah, the wings. I need to show you this. So I was kind of curious how he held the wings onto this thing, because mine, I did the Merlin locks, which have a screw that goes in at this angle here that draws everything together. This is different. This has two little magnetized doors, so you can get up inside with a bolt like that. So that's pretty interesting. So you go under there with a screw. It goes through those hardwood mounts and goes right through the main joiner, and that should work pretty slick. It does have a little bit of slop. I'm not too thrilled about that, but mine is very tight. But I have a feeling that, you know, mine was gonna eventually focus. You stupid thing. Mine would eventually, you know, start to break in a little bit over time. So I'm not worried about it. But yeah, let me actually hold on. I really don't want to do this. Oh, damn, that's a lot of work. Anyways, it's probably really hard to see, but you can kind of tell there's a texture on there. Especially up at the top, you can it's more noticeable up there, but you can definitely feel it. And I'm not sure why. The rest of the fin is like that. This is the original white and red. All I did was remove the blue. Had to do the guy was really good at covering, but he did a lot of things backwards. Like right here where the fin turns into the dorsal fin, he covered the fin, covered the dorsal fin, and then started to put a piece around this joint. Well, that's what you're supposed to do, however, it's backwards. Where I covered this joint first all the way around, and then I covered the dorsal fin, and then the vertical fin, and now everything just looks absolutely perfect. So, yeah, he did a lot of things that were just kind of backwards. And I could not get the covering off the dorsal fin. So for this here, I just put the darker blue directly over top, and it actually went down pretty well. A couple little bubbles here and there that will work their way out. Servos are in the stab. This entire airplane is outfitted with high-tech 7955s, which are just monster servos. But yeah, that just makes me nervous. So at full deflection, this does have quite a bit of play. Now, it's not a 3D airplane, but it's got to be able to do a good knife edge. So if it doesn't want to hold a knife edge, what I'll end up doing is doing some surgery in here. There should already be a hard block, so I probably won't have to do anything. But I'll end up just cutting a couple small holes, one on each side of the fuselage, kind of going back, just drilling a hole going this way. And I'll take the pull cables and run them up through these holes, and I'll just have to put an arm on either side of the rudder. So I'll have a solid pull directly to the rudder, not through any wires. Yikes. Anywho, but we'll see. That's literally an evening project, so I'll leave it be for now just to see how it's going to fly. But as you can see, he did an impeccable job building and covering this airplane. Absolutely fantastic. And you can tell it's been around. I mean, when we get really close to the covering, you can see it's been out in the sun. It's been ironed back down with a little too much heat. So, but yeah, it's covering. Like I said, this was naked a day ago, and now it's back to brand new again, and that's because it was covered. Another good shot of the stripes. You can kind of see a little bit of a ridge right there. You can see where I cut the original white off, but I had to leave enough of the old white on there to give me an overlap. And it just worked out good. And he covered the fairing in sections, which actually looks more appropriate because of how it attached to the full-scale airplane. It attached in these locations here as well as the fuselage. So covering it that way actually looks pretty good. So yeah. So now that all of the covering stuff is done on this thing, I'll be able to find a more permanent home for the wings, and I'm going to take that 116 off there, and hopefully sooner than later I'll have a DLE 111 to throw in there. Oh man. I got a really good deal on the airplane, but it's still a lot of money to spend up front on an airplane. At least for me. I typically do not buy planes like this because it's a lot of money. I mean, this is not a cheap, Oriental ARF. This is a hand-built right here in the good old USA by, a good old school modeler. Oh, man. So I am totally happy to have it. Even though I've already had to put quite a bit of work into it. I didn't have to, but, once again, I know this airplane extremely well. I know what it's supposed to look like. So I have no problem putting in the extra effort. Plus, it's February. What else am I going to be doing? And I know it's not on the subject, but the Bearcat, we'll just take a brief look, and you can probably see pretty well, even through the camera, that covering now extremely looks like aluminum. And in fact, look at the difference between the stab and the elevators. You can clearly see that the effect that I gave it for making it look more like metal worked. I'll get more into that later. But the prop is here for that. I painted the anti-glare strip on top of the cowl and fuselage. It's literally ready to go. Just waiting for warm weather. All right. Well, I think that should just about cover it for now. I hope. I've had enough of covering. I busted my ass for a day and a half to get this thing, pretty much recovered so I could do a video for you guys. So, I'm going to get to work yanking that engine out of there and just hope that the 111 is going to slide in there fairly easily. Hold on. Oh, I don't know what you're seeing, but I apologize. Oh, that's a lot of work. Because if need be, I can put servos elsewhere. I don't need to have a servo on the choke, so I can put a throttle servo anywhere. Just, I know this plane requires a lot of nose weight, so it's going to be kind of tricky figuring out where to put that nose weight. So hopefully this will all work out. Anywho. All right. Let's step back here, get one more good shot of it. Okay. I think I'm going to go take a nap. I'm kind of tired. I know there's like some football game or something going on today, so I'm going to promptly ignore that. And that should do it for now. All right. Later.